everyone. Thanks for coming to our second product engineering social. The goal of these things, The goal of these things is to get product engineers from across the company to come hang out, listen to a cool talk, and just generally mingle and talk about product at Dropbox or anything else. So with us today, we have Vincent Wu from CoderPad. He founded CoderPad while at Everlane. He's going to kind of talk about the origin story of CoderPad and maybe a tiny bit about his ideas for Dropbox at the end. Tiny bit. Cool. So without further ado, I will give this.
Hello. Oh, my screen went out. Hold on. I got this. All right. Nice to meet you all. I'm Vincent. I run a little thing called CoderPad. Hopefully some of you have heard of it. I mean, I assume. I don't really know. But it's a platform for doing interviews. Dropbox is one of my customers. That's how all of this happened. So, you know, I'm not some weirdo they pulled off the street. And today I'm going to talk to you about a clickbait headline that I wrote. This is real. This is a real headline that I chose to put for this talk. Yes, I am not crazy. This is the less provocative headline. So today we're going to talk about small business stuff, specifically small business stuff you do on yourself or by yourself. And some of it is going to be about product, but it's not necessarily going to be about how to build a specific thing. This is sort of my ideas about what it takes to build essentially a small company on your own and how that influences some amount of product thinking and how you look at various opportunities. Hopefully this is interesting or useful to you. I don't have much in the way of, I don't know. I think the last guy you guys had were, I guess some React dude. Well, that's pretty hardcore stuff. We do a lot of really boring stuff at CoderPad. We try to keep it like as straightforward as possible, and that's a lot about what this talk is. So without further ado, CoderPad, for a little bit of background, is a tool for conducting interviews with other programmers. And notably, I started it while I still worked at Everlane, which is it's a fashion retailer online. Some of you may be familiar with it. But by most accounts, CoderPad is not a success, a resounding failure. If you use sort of the prevalent, at least today, metrics for how companies should be valued, right? Like there's 0% odds that CoderPad will ever be a billion-dollar business, probably very low odds that will even come anywhere close to like 100 million. But we do have you guys as customers, so thank you for the money. I really appreciate that. A girl's got to eat, you know, so. And a lot of this is by design. Like CoderPad was never intentioned to be a runaway success from the beginning. And a lot of it was structured so that I could have a lot of flexibility building the company in the early days and still, you know, keep the job that I worked at the time, which I really enjoyed and was great fun. So here's a screenshot. This is for those of you who haven't used CoderPad. I'm unsure how many of you have or haven't. Like, show of hands, how many of this looks unfamiliar? Familiar? Raise your hand if this is familiar. Okay, yes, great. So I don't really have to dwell on what this is. Basically, you write code on the left and you run it on the right. I think this is pretty simple, you know. Like, you get it. You guys all get it. We're moving on. Okay. How did this happen? Well, I did a lot of interviewing at Everlane on both sides of the table. I got a lot of free trips to New York with companies that I pretended that I'd be willing to work at. And I interviewed a lot of people who wanted to work at Everlane. And very often this is very frustrating, especially over the phone. We do a lot of interviews. You have tools like Collab Edit, Google Docs, Stipe, those sorts of things, but they didn't really do what I wanted them to do, which is like, okay, figure out what's wrong with your code. Like, why is this actually broken? And candidates would struggle with that, but I definitely seen that their like homework assignments and so forth were totally fine. Like they could program. It's just something about like the phone environment rendered them incapable of reasoning about what their code did without like an active compiler. So I took out my credit card, not my credit card, I took out my boss's credit card, and I tried to go on the internet and look for a product that does exactly what CoderPad does. It lets me like interview a candidate and run their code at the same time, right? This is not crazy stuff. But no one did it, so I built one myself in a weekend just for Ruby. Everyone at work started using it. It was a pretty obvious thing to do, and like none of the candidates really even expressed surprise that this was a thing. So this is my first hint. This is a very like sort of natural product that wouldn't take a lot of convincing to get people to buy. So I spent like 3 months churning out like a V1, and the very first customer I landed, I drove down to Palo Alto, Udacity. They are teaching people to program Java. So I talked to a room full of tutors about why using CoderPad was the perfect solution, for teaching people Java on the internet, and I think they still pay me like a small amount of money. Was that 20? Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's what was that, a year? I don't know, a couple hundred. It's nice. It's free money. Anyway, so about a year of this passed. I still worked at Everland. Eventually got to an arbitrary cutoff in number revenue, $4,000 a month, which after taxes pays for a living room in San Francisco. And at that point, I decided to quit because I thought it was worth the adventure, and we'd see what would pan out. Now we're a very modestly successful 3-person company. And here I have small business in quotes. And I mean something very specific by small business. I mean, I think the simplest way to put it, I mean not a startup. And we'll get more into what I mean by that later. So next slide. Why do we even care about this? Like, why small business? Why is this a topic for this talk? Like, this is, in many ways, completely pointless for all of you to be listening to right now. Like, you worked at Dropbox, you have, hundreds of millions of users. Like, every single line of code you do impacts, a lot of people. A lot happens when you, git, commit, whatever. And in a lot of ways, the sort of, ethos and sort of structure for thinking about the stuff that I'm talking about here is going to be largely useless to you. It's not going to matter a lot in terms of your day job. But I like talking about this stuff. I like talking about this stuff because I think this is like an underserved sort of niche in the Valley. Like, we have a lot of very talented people like all of you in this room right now, who all of you probably sort of eyeing like side projects. Jesus, hang on. Okay, never mind. You're probably eyeing side projects and other things you could be doing with your time. And I feel like the idea of just making a small business that you can run autonomously on the side doesn't really cross a lot of people's minds. It's not really considered like a legitimate life choice for some reason among, I think, very talented programmers in the Valley. So I'm sort of the lobby for them now. I'm lobbying you to maybe take this lifestyle business stuff maybe a little more seriously. It could be good, we'll talk about why it could be good. Here, let's go. Here's why this is fun. This is part of what I really like, and maybe this part is the most impactful for you guys here. CoderPad is run in a very strange way, I think, by most startup standards. We don't collect any user metrics whatsoever. I don't have Mixpanel. I think we use Google Analytics, but I don't think it works, so I never look at it. And we have no idea if stuff is really working or not. I mean, we do, it's obviously facetious, we do know if things are working or not, but we don't know in a way that involves numbers in any way, right? So our metric for whether something is working or not is whether we get emails from customers telling us that it's working and that they're really happy that we did something. And our metric for when things aren't working or when customers email us to tell us that things are not working. So we have this very direct pipeline to customers, but even still, you can make a good argument for using metrics. And I think the biggest reason we really don't use metrics is because the analysis and understanding of numbers is a deeply fraught subject. It's very, very hard to do, and requires a lot of cognitive energy. And by not allowing ourselves to even think about that topic, we force ourselves to be very simple. We're only allowed to think about features in very, very simple ways. And I have a few of those up here. I think the most obvious ones are I think the most obvious one in the intuitive sense is will this feature make a customer love us? And if we can't reason about that intuitively, if we needed numbers to prove that, the feature's immediately off the table because we don't have the time. And I say we, but mostly I mean I. I don't have the time to build a feature that might make someone love us. It has to be something that's obviously good for everybody, or we're not doing it at all, full stop, because we don't have a lot of money, we don't have a lot of time. So I have the 3 criteria here. Basically, for us to do anything, we basically need a strong yes on at least 2 of those, I would say. Right? So either it makes us money and it's easy to do, or customers love us and it's easy to do, or it will make us money and customers will love us, but it's going to take a month or 2. Those are the 3 options. If you only get one of those, it's probably better off being done later, aka never. So that's why we only have one page on the website that matters. It's the screenshot you saw earlier. It's the one where you conduct interviews in, and it's a really good page. All the other pages are really bad. They're forms. They're really ugly. We should work on them, but we're not going to. So moving on. Why is this relevant? You all have a lot of energy in this room. I know Dropbox pays you very well. I know that you have a lot of incentives to keep working at your stuff at work, but I know that after a certain hour in the day, it's hard to work on the same topic. And I know a lot of you are thinking about other things you can do. And I think for smart people in our situation, these are the usual things that get done, right? You do open source, you work on your personal website, I don't know, you go to a bar with friends and talk about the ways you're going to be Mark Zuckerberg, and I think a few of us, but like a very small number of us, I think dwarfed by the other three, think about like how we could start a very small business. And I think you were all pretty good at thinking about the other three already, so we're not going to talk about it. We're going to talk about why and like the hows of small business stuff here. So I think the first part of that, before we untangle it, is motivation. Why do people do each of those four things? I think the first three are very straightforward. I think you do open source because you want to get really good at something. You want to be known for being really good at something. I think you do your personal website because you want to be known as having very good taste or breadth of knowledge or experience or a variety of like sort of more flattering features. And I think the people who really want to make it big for obvious reasons, right? Like everyone wants to be Elon Musk. Like I want to be Elon Musk, just not that bad. But starting a small business, I think you do it because you kind of want some money. Don't get me wrong, everybody wants some money, but I think you want a little bit of money now, and maybe more money later, but definitely not the big driver here. The big driver for you here is not you're going to make a ton of money eventually. The idea here is you can probably make some money pretty soon. And if you pursue that angle, it really changes the way you think about sort of your product and like how you design it and like what you can afford to spend time on in general. So we're going to talk about how that looks. And what do we mean by small business? It looks like it has to be something relatively autonomous, right? Like you have to be able to do it while you still go to work every day. That's what I did. So that means customers need a way to see value on their own pretty quickly. And there needs to be a way to convert that value immediately into money. So no long plays. Like it has to be something you convince someone is good for them and they can fork over money pretty quickly. I'm reminded of Drew Houston forcing people to install Dropbox in the early days, like physically. I really like that. This is similar, right? You need to be able to cash out as quick as possible. Otherwise, you're probably wasting your time, right? And you need to be able to get going pretty quickly. And like when I mean not too much upfront time or money, I mean like 3 months and like under $5,000. So like not a lot. Nothing that requires you to buy hardware. Nothing that requires you to, invent a new technology. Nothing special. So these are all really, really boring requirements. And you would think that boring requirements are actually really easy, but boring requirements are actually much harder than you might think. Like it's easy to come up with big ideas. It's surprisingly difficult to come up with constrained, small, good ideas. So why even bother with these constraints? I mean, there's a lot of perks. Some of them aren't quite obvious. I mean, I've listed a few here, so I don't really need to go into too much depth, I think. But in terms of doing this versus doing a startup, I think the biggest sell is you don't have to give up everything. Like, you don't have to quit your job. Like, if you like your job, that's good. You should stay at your job. Your job's none. Like, this is a nice place. This place is, like, look at all this booze. This is awesome. If you quit your job to do a startup, you don't have a lot left. And when you fail, because you will fail, because startups are really, really hard, you're going to have to pick up the pieces. I prefer personally not to ever drop the pieces to begin with. So this is a much lower variability approach to business making. I mean, your rewards are smaller, sure, but your risk is much smaller as well. You control more of the moving pieces. You don't need a team. You don't need VC money. You don't need a crazy moonshot idea that seems implausible. And I think best of all, and this is why this is the last one, it requires you to be way less tough. Like, starting a small business is easy because in the beginning it just feels like a side project. It feels like what you were going to do already. It feels like an open source project, except you're thinking about how to make money, And if it fails, it's just like, haha, that thing you did for a lark failed, right? You don't have to worry about getting your ego invested in the thing until after it's successful. And people discount this, but I think there's a really marked shift in psychology and how you think about what to do with your time. It makes the thing way more fun, I think. I mean, startups are fun too, but they're fun in this sort of adrenaline, junkie, thrill-seeking way. And when you lose it all, you feel awful. But this is going for like ice cream or whatever, It's good. It's a good time. Okay, so this is how people screw it up. I'm going to go straight into it. I'm not really going to talk about how to build a small business in the sort of literal sense, like how to incorporate or do an LLC or how to do that kind of stuff. I'm going to talk about ways it goes off the rails, which I think is way more useful. I think especially because like in Silicon Valley, people give you advice on how to start startups, like in the classical sense. So a lot of what they say isn't necessarily like what you should actually do, or at least in what my disclaimered opinion, what you shouldn't do. I mean, you should trust me about as far as you could throw me, but here we go. Your business should be really, really boring, like extremely boring. And I don't mean like it's okay that your business is boring, like boring businesses can make money too. I mean your business should be boring. Like if your business is exciting, it might work, but let's talk, right? If it's boring, then we have a start, right? And this seems counterintuitive because startups that are publicized are typically exciting because they do something new and novel. But if you're starting a small business, you can't afford to be novel, and here's why. If you're building something for the first time, it's probably really hard because building anything for the first time ever is always really, really hard. You have to make people understand what it is. You have to convince people that whatever that is worth dollars. And it's probably going to take a long time to build a new thing because there's nothing to pattern match off of. Like, there's nothing for me to rip off. If you can rip something off to get going really fast, that's a huge boon. You should try it. It's great. It's a good time. So how does this play out? Here's a website, ClockSpot.com. I'm not even going to include a screenshot because this website is so boring. It does time tracking. We'll get into it. But it's run by a guy I've met. His name's Jason Ho, and Jason is amazing. He built this website, and for a lot of it, he was just in Asia. He got pretty far up Everest. Funny story, like his website crashed on the way up to base camp, and he had to walk into like a tourist shack with like one computer running Windows XP to try to like figure out why his Canadian server had stopped working, and he barely managed to get it back online. That's how little like sort of effort investment was gone into this, and yet he won't let me say how much money he makes. Let's just say he makes some money. He might make more money than me. So it's really clever, and all it really does is, if you're familiar with like punch clocks, you put a little piece of paper in, it punches out like when you get in your shift and leave the shift at work. That's all it does. It's just on computers. It was sort of right place, right time thing. His dad was a pediatrician and was starting some new offices and needed to buy some punch clocks, and Jason thought it was absurd. I mean, it is absurd. But there were also a lot of competitors, and he still managed to make money, right? Why? Because this idea is so boring. People already understand it. It's not hard to explain. People want it. They fork over their credit card, and they never leave, because once you're using a time tracking software, like, you never need to leave. And that's why it's a good idea, because, you know, it's dull. So your idea doesn't need to be sexy. It just needs to make someone's life a lot better than it used to be, and that's a surprisingly high bar. But it's a very specific bar, too, so it's easy to address. Corollary is you should also be boring in how you do technology. If you're building a website, you should probably use Rails. If you don't know Rails or you can't use Rails for whatever reason, use whatever the next fastest, most comfortable thing you know already is. Do not invent anything unless you have to, and you probably don't have to. Just avoid originality in any form. Just try to be, you know, try to rip everything off. The next big point is your business should have a plan to make money like day one. There's no ramp-up period. There's no excuse for not understanding what you're doing here. And I see a lot of people sort of in our position who are just starting something just screw this up constantly. They always push out plans for making money into the future, like after we have users, after we have more traction, after we get some press. And this inevitably, in 100% of cases, does not work because it just forces, I mean, it allows you to be lazy, number one, but two, like, it's unrealistic. Like, if your product is good, it's good enough to charge day one. If it's not good, then you're doing something wrong and you shouldn't be launching at all. So the product you do launch, you should charge for immediately. And honestly, this sort of requirement disqualifies more things than it informs you how to actually do them, right? So that means you can't do two-sided marketplaces, social networks, dating apps, you know, Uber for X, Airbnb for Y. All those sorts of ideas are probably beyond the pale of a thing you can achieve on your own with not a lot of money and not a lot of time. So I think the golden rule at the bottom is, like, if you can convince one person to give you money, you're in a good spot. If you have to convince like two different people who don't really like each other very much to give you both money, or however that needs to work, you're probably better off leaving it for, you know, Andreessen Horowitz or whatever. Here we go. Okay. So this is the golden standard. I don't know if you guys have seen this website before. This is bingocardcreator.com. Some of you may be familiar with Patty11, aka Patrick McKenzie. I think he has written more words on Hacker News than anybody else in the world, which means he is entitled to shake Paul Graham's hand once per year. It's a little known extra benefit. But he ran this website for a long time. By ran, I mean sort of like sat by while it made money. And you can see what it does right in the screenshot. I've included it just because it's so instructive. Like, there's a button where you buy it. And what you buy is the thing that makes you bingo cards. This whole website is summarizable in this one image. How many startups can you say that about? I hope at least half. I mean, I don't know, personally. But like, think about how crazy this is. Like, this guy makes money, or used to, he sold this website, used to make money off elementary school teachers who were running educational bingo things for their class. And I don't know if you guys are aware, but elementary school teachers in America are not the most wealthy demographic. And he still got them to part with $35 just for this product because he saved them so much pain, so much heartache, just trying to shuffle bingo cards around that they were willing to fork over, $35 just to be able to not think about this ever again. And there's a corollary to this that I'm going to bring up. It's if you are charging this amount or less for your real software product that does real things, you're doing something wrong. I've seen this guy I know. He started a browser testing startup. It lets you basically run any browser in the cloud instantly. It's pretty cool. The businesses that are using it to test their website, I don't know how much value they're getting, but almost certainly they're getting 10 times as much value as he's charging. He charged $10 a month or something. That's basically poverty line. If you manage to sell something to someone, it's because they thought the money they gave you was worth way less than whatever you're giving them, way less. So you should charge about how much value you think they're getting, divided by some factor, right? And that number is almost never 20. It's a really, really low number. And obviously Dropbox is an exception as a consumer startup. Obviously there's a lot of network effects you get by having large volume and distribution. These are sort of big boy plays. You can't really afford to think about stuff like this. You need to be able to make money now, and that usually means you charge it, a lot of money if you can. By the way, thanks again for paying me money. I really appreciate it. Moving on, here's an example of what not to do. I don't know if you guys are familiar with TarSnap. It's relatively famous in some circles as being run like a utility. It's run by this guy named Colin Percival, and he just does automated encrypted backups for you. It's hyper secure. It's a really big deal. The people who use it love it. You guys are pretty familiar, I think, with per gigabyte pricing. In this case, maybe you can run the numbers, but he's not charging very much money. I think you expect to pay $10 a month or something. There are whole businesses who back up their all their information, all their critical customer information on this system, and I would guess they probably pay $100 a month or something for that, for never having to think about that again. That's incredible to me. This guy really hates the idea of charging his customers more money. He hates it so much that when AWS and Google both dropped their storage prices, he lowered his prices too. He gave his customers free money for no reason, because they were all already very happy with the previous price they were paying. It was insane. And I think Dropbox gets some of that flack sometimes too, when I think you see nerds on Hacker News whine about it now and then. When AWS prices go down, they're oh, how come Dropbox hasn't dropped its prices? It's because you're not paying for per GB pricing. You're paying for a product that solves a problem for me, and that's worth a certain amount of dollars that has nothing to do with how much a spinning disk of metal costs. So charge money, charge real money. It's important. Okay, and this is the last big point that I think I see a lot of people fall over on. It's distribution, and this one's really, really easy to overlook. But long story short, if you can't get anyone to buy your stuff, it doesn't matter how good it is, and there is no product so good that it sells itself. There is none. Even Drew had that. I really like that. You guys remember that Dropbox video where he has all the internet jokes in the folders as he's moving them around? That one's great. No one? What? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, never mind. We're just gonna keep going. Okay. This point is more subtle because there's not really a formula, right? The moment a distribution strategy becomes formulaic, it becomes useless. So this is where sort of your personal expertise as a person who understands your market or your product a little better than everybody else comes in, right? So in my case, in CoderPad's case, I understood that candidate experience was important. So a lot of what I did in the early days was message to customers why you're losing candidates in the pipeline because you're not treating them very well. One aspect of how you're not treating them very well is this sort of interview practices, a little barbaric, not allowing them to run code, right? Bingo Card Creator, one of its biggest distribution channels in the beginning, I think maybe even still, was just Google AdWords. Patrick essentially had the insight that teachers were Googling for this stuff, and no one was really servicing their Google searches very well. So he could snap up a lot of very cheap keywords, and this is, granted, much harder to do today, but he saw an opportunity and he acted on it. I mean, I think that's the lesson there. So the corollary here is you need probably at least to get good at one of these two things, either sales or marketing. In our case, we do a lot of sales. In ClockSpot, in Bingo Card Creator sense, or situations, they've both gotten very good at SEO and AdWords. But at the end of the day, you do need some way to get something in front of someone to get them to give you their money. How hands-on you want to be depends a lot about how much the thing you're selling is valued at. If your product is very cheap, obviously you have to go more like wider distribution. If it's more expensive, you can maybe afford to do something more high touch. But this is sort of on you. And like whatever people are going to be doing 5 years from now, we're probably not going to be able to anticipate. Like no one really saw like social media marketing coming. Okay, like Zuckerberg saw, but like a lot of people didn't see. I definitely didn't see. And like now it's its whole cottage industry. Not even cottage, it's like its own mansion industry. It's just putting stuff on Facebook for people. Okay, so overall lessons here are a lot of the stuff is really, really mind-numbing and boring and dull, right? Like picking a boring business, picking boring distribution channels, like charging money. They don't allow you to do big plays. You're not able to do something world-changing. And it's even difficult to pick a good, boring business, as like annoying as that seems. Most of the good, boring businesses are taken already. And the worst part about doing it alone is that you can't really talk to anybody about it. Like, I don't know, you can chat with your coworkers and they ask you what you did with your business that day, and you told them you like sent 10 more emails than you did last week, or you made your homepage like a little more colorful. Like, it's not really exciting stuff. Like, there's not a big play there. And I think these are probably the biggest reasons not to do any of the things I've just said, right? Like, it doesn't make that great a story. Like, if you are modestly successful, mostly what it gives you is some manner of freedom and financial security, but it's like, no one's gonna write a biography about me. Like, I think it's really unlikely, but I enjoy my freedom. So, what's the real value here? I mean, why are we even still thinking about this right now? I mean, I think a lot of these ethoses have a lot of value for people who are pursuing larger ideas too, right? The way that we think about everything at CoderPad is in a way of like immediate value, right? Like, all of our systems do not allow us to pursue ideas or ventures that do not add any value like within like the next week. Like every single thing we do has to happen immediately. And this obviously takes a lot of very good options off our plate. Like there's a lot of totally sane things that we could do that we're just not going to because of this. But of all the things that remain, they are all very honest. So we're sort of very constrained, but like what we're left with after the constraints, I think, is something very satisfying. Like an emotional sense. Like everything we've done, we built for ourselves or for our customers. We're not really beholden to anyone. And we might move very slowly, but I think we've managed to build a lot of quality into the product. And you know, like, it feels good to say. Like it feels like kind of like the original American dream, you know, the one where you, like the whole garage and 2 cars and chicken in every pot thing, like, you know, that kind of thing. Like not like a wildly rich, like you own like 3 houses kind of deal. Just like you make a pretty stable living, it's nice, and you help people. So it's like, it's lower pressure and in some ways less rewarding, but in some ways more rewarding, or at least rewarding in a different way than you can get in other places. So I think it's worth thinking about. So segueing very badly forward, I have a couple small suggestions for what I think these ideas can be good. Like, just bear with me. And I've actually been thinking about this for a while because I've been using Dropbox for a really long time. And I think I see a lot of Dropbox stuff from maybe like a small business perspective. So some of these asks are maybe like small business slanted. And obviously I'm going to show my like naivety here. As soon as I hit the next slide, it's going to be obvious how dumb I am. So just, you know, bear with me. Here we go. So here are 3 ideas that I like very much, and you're free to tell me after or even right now why they're stupid. But the first thing I really like is, it's really weird to me that I have all my docs in Dropbox, but then I put them in the thing like HelloSign to get signatures, and then I get that back, and then I countersign, and I have like 3 different copies, and then I have to figure out where to put them all and like what to name them all, because these systems don't really have like a naming convention or anything. And it's really weird because I think of Dropbox as the place where all my business documents go. But for some reason, Dropbox doesn't really have an opinion on business documents. I know you're doing paper, right? But like a lot of extant stuff, I think, could be handled without too much in the way of crazy infrastructure. Like take, for instance, like what if you were to clone HelloSign, right? How would it work? Like I have a PDF in a folder. I say, Dropbox, I want this thing signed. Dropbox does some crazy offline computation where it says, OK, we found a bunch of places that look like signatory lines. Are all these right? And do you want to add any? OK, yes. Great. I don't have to open a website. I don't have to do anything else. Like, please send it to these email addresses and let me know when they're all done and back. And the moment it's done, everything's already organized for me. Like, I would really love this. As it stands right now, Dropbox makes me do a lot of work I'd rather not do. And I liked Dropbox initially because it actually eliminated a lot of work for me, right? Like the pain of sending someone a file was so horrific that we invented all these hacks to email each other crap. And Dropbox got rid of a lot of that for us, and I really want them to sort of push it all the way through, right? Like, help me stop thinking about stuff. And in that vein, like I think a native search bar, like I'm sure you guys have talked about this, like 100% sure. But it is, Dropbox doesn't really have an opinion on organization. And I think we're all sort of aware that like files are becoming less and less the final arbiter of truth in all things. And as that happens, like being able to find stuff seems to be getting harder and harder. Like I try to keep my Dropbox organized, but it is not even close to organized. And every day that passes, that entropy gets worse. Like I get more and more afraid of trying to organize my Dropbox. And there's not like an easy or friendly way to like encourage me to organize it better or to help me alleviate not having organized it well. And I think a search bar is like one feature in that vein, but I think like the general theme of like, how do I get at my shit is pretty good, you know? Like, I mean, I think you make a real feature out of that, you know, Morty? And the last one has nothing to do with Dropbox. It's a universal chat client. I say this because I know Dropbox is pursuing a lot of like wildly crazy verticals secretly, I'm sure. I think just because they want to, you know, the ball is going somewhere and someone wants to get ahead of a ball. And I think one thing that I think would be cool is like for some reason I find it really strange that there is no good chat client for OS X, like none. There is none. You could use iMessage and it's pretty good, but it works with like a very limited set of things. And it's especially striking to me that there is no good Google Hangouts client, like at all. Isn't that weird? Like we all use it, but it sucks. Like, why doesn't someone take like 3 weeks and build like a good chat client? Like, wouldn't that be really cool to have a product where everyone was chatting through? Like, it could maybe even eventually integrate with a Dropbox thing. Like, I don't know how this stuff works. Get legal. Like, that's not my job. Anyway, this would probably be really hard to pull off for various legal reasons. I think Google and Facebook play shenanigans about what you're allowed to do, but I'd say, I don't know, reverse engineer it and just shove it in the beginning, see if it takes. If it does take, you have like bargaining room, I don't know. It doesn't look like any of them are doing it. Like, how come there's no native client for Messenger either? I mean, maybe there is. I don't know. I don't think there is. I use the website. It sucks. It's weird. Okay. Basically, all these boil down to like, how can you help me make my life more easy or like dumb is another word, or boring. I want a more boring life in a lot of ways. There's some aspects of my life I want to be more exciting, and like CoderPad has some exciting bits to it. Like we do a lot of crazy shit with Docker, but like we can only really tolerate like 1 to 2 crazy things at a time. And I like everything else being as dumb as possible. And I think Dropbox has been really good for me in the past because it just made a lot of previously exciting, adventurous stuff like sending someone a file like really dumb. So that's good. Boring is good. Keep everything boring. Okay, that's the end of the talk. My name is Vincent. This is my email address and the thing on the Bluebird website that you can find me at. Okay, great. Questions? Anyone? Okay, Angela has a question. Thanks for asking. I really appreciate that.
So I have a question about so CoderPad has this thing where you can make like 2 free pads. And so then effectively you're like a non-paying customer. How many people like actually do this? Do you, like,
a lot. There's a lot of people who try to game us really, really hard to get free shit. But, so this is the thing. This is where the other principles come in. Like, none of that stuff matters. Like, anyone who would game me for a free plan would never pay for a plan. So I don't care. Like, there's mild protections in place. You can't use, like, a pad forever unless you're paying. But, like, why waste time, right? I'd rather spend more time making the customers who actually pay me money happier, or make more money, or, you know, go eat, right? People who... Actually, this is really interesting. Actually, these free plan abusers are some of the best people for poking holes in my security. We got really popular on 8chan over the weekend, and those guys went hog wild. Like, they found some pretty cool stuff in Docker that I hadn't even dug into yet. And they, like, at least one of them reported it more or less, like, honestly, and that was really cool. So actually, I kind of like having that free option around, at least for now. We might get rid of it eventually. Who knows? Anyone else? This guy.
How did you just cold call a bunch of people and you were like, yo, you want?
That's a good question. We did a little, in the beginning I didn't really know how the system was going to work. I thought I was going to do more marketing than sales. So I did like some early Hacker News stuff. I just started asking friends like, hey, are you guys hiring people? Let me talk to your boss. And I would just go to people's workplaces and talk to their bosses. And eventually I conned a few of them into paying me like 20 bucks a month, which is way too little, by the way, way too little. But in the beginning, I didn't know better. And eventually, it just sort of caught on. Like, this is the great part about this business, actually, is that like we've had candidates sell the idea to other companies because they got declined from a company that used, like, this definitely happened with Dropbox. Like a candidate interviews at Dropbox on CoderPad, they get a no hire, they go somewhere else, and they're like, okay, let's do the phone interview, and the candidate's like, actually, can we use this thing? And that has been responsible for like a surprising number of leads. You wouldn't think, I mean, it's not our biggest channel by far. Our biggest channel is we email you if we think you're hiring people, but it's pretty good. It gives you instant validation, and you know, it's better to have an inbound than an outbound, definitely whenever you can. Got anything else? Anybody? Okay, you're allowed.
So you mentioned that like don't use user metrics, but I know you do user research because I got emails from you about user research.
Yeah.
Have you like received any feedback that like actually like surprised you or like significantly altered like, feature development?
No, we try to be really boring, which means we try not to be surprised. So in that sense, no. It's more like if someone says something negative, it's usually because we knew that was probably going to happen sooner or later. And if someone says something positive, it's always like a pleasant surprise, but like one that should occur relatively frequently. No one has said any completely bonkers shit. Actually, a couple people have, but those are always like random spammers and like crazy people on the internet. Not like real customers. Customers have people who actually pay me money are already bought into the idea and they really understand the value prop, so they're not going to be too out there. Like, I've gotten a lot of feature requests from Dropbox, and they've all been very sound. I've even implemented a couple of them. So, yeah. There you go. Yeah, over here?
So you mentioned like anything less than $20 a month is charity.
Probably, yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on like what kind of margins you should aim for on this kind of?
Healthy.
Like 90 plus?
So this is I was going to get into this topic, but I didn't feel like there was enough space into it. But like, there's a very typical engineering mindset that I think is very dangerous. It's to price based on cost. And the whole notion that you have a margin sort of presupposes that you have a per unit cost. But you don't. Like, your servers cost a certain amount, but if you were to condition off that, everyone would be charging like $1, right? No one would ever make any money. So like, what the true cost is your time. Your true cost is the opportunity cost of like, what if you just went really ham at your job and you worked like 80 hours a week and you got promoted and you were the new Drew Houston 2 years from now, right? Like, what would that look like monetarily? You should charge such that that option is not as attractive, right? And that usually means you need to charge way more than $20 a month. And this is obviously ballpark. People in different countries have different costs of living and so forth, but you live in San Francisco. I live in a living room. Come on, I need money. Okay, I think someone in the back had a...
So you said you had 2 employees, right?
Uh-huh.
So this is like San Francisco, really competitive engineering, hiring, but your company has no upside, no like liquidity for them, right?
Yeah.
So do you pay them really high? Do you do some sort of revenue share? Are
Normally, I would say it's a secret, but one of them is a salesperson, so he makes what he makes. Another guy is a junior developer who I think is getting a lot of value out of this in that, like, it's rare, I think, to work as a junior developer where you work with the only other developer on the project and they coach you like every single day about how to think about both product and programming. And this opportunity is exciting enough to a certain subset of people that eventually I managed to hire one person in that respect. Is this a typical job that I would encourage people to take? No, absolutely not. You have to be crazy to work with me. You have to be fucking bonkers. Yeah. It's fulfilling though, I think. I mean, I hope. They tell me it is. I don't know if I should believe them, but you know, what are you gonna do? Okay. Anybody else? The screen went black, so I feel like it's like ominous. Nothing? Okay, let's all drink. Yeah.